The arrival of the alien fleet was nothing short of catastrophic for Earth. The first sign of its presence was the sudden darkening of the sky, as massive warships began to descend upon the planet, their sleek black hulls blocking out the sun and casting an ominous shadow over every continent. At first, humanity thought it was a natural disaster, some sort of cosmic event, or perhaps a strange weather phenomenon. But the truth was far worse. The Zarnoth Empire had arrived to claim Earth for themselves. The warships came without warning. Their size dwarfed anything humans had ever built. The largest of them all was a colossus that could easily eclipse entire cities. Its weapons bristled like thorns on a beast ready to strike. The smaller ships in the fleet swarmed around it like a pack of wolves in perfect formation. The Zarnoth had come with one simple demand: surrender or face annihilation. Humanity was thrust into chaos within hours of the first ships appearing. Governments scrambled to react. Communication networks were overwhelmed. Military forces were put on high alert, but no one knew what to do. How could they fight against something so advanced? How could they even begin to comprehend the technology of such a formidable enemy? The Zarnoth began broadcasting their demands, their voices booming from the ship speakers, echoing across the planet. They spoke in a language humans could not understand, but the meaning was clear, their tone dripping with arrogance. They saw Earth as a mere stepping stone, a world to be annexed and drained of its resources. In response, Earth's leaders gathered emergency meetings. The UN was convened. Military leaders from every nation joined forces, but there was nothing they could do. No one had anticipated such an invasion. Even the most advanced weapons on Earth were little more than toys in comparison to the power the Zarnoth possessed. The world's population was paralyzed by fear. And then there was General Juno Kane. She was a name that had never crossed the minds of most people. She was not a political leader or a well-known figure, but she was a woman with an extraordinary understanding of Earth's hidden resources. She had been working in secret for years on a project so advanced that even her closest allies in the military had no idea about it. Until now, as the news of the invasion spread, Kane was already preparing her response. She knew humanity's only chance at survival rested on a weapon that no one had even dreamed of. Kane watched as the alien fleet moved closer, their presence growing more oppressive with each passing minute. She had seen their capabilities firsthand, and she knew that the Zarnoth were not here to negotiate. Their fleets were preparing to strike, and they were prepared to wipe out humanity without a second thought. Earth had no real defense, no shields, no countermeasures against the might of these invaders. But Kane had something they didn't. She had a plan, something humanity could use to turn the tide. The technology she had developed in secret could harness the combined power of Earth's resources and turn them into an unstoppable force. She had only one chance to unleash it. She gave the order to activate it, and as she did so, the hum of power filled the air. All over the world, the stage was set for the fight of Earth's life. As the alien ships prepared to attack, humanity's first response was to show the Zarnoth that they had gravely underestimated Earth's potential. The time for surrender was over, and the battle for survival had just begun. General Kane stood in the command center, her eyes glued to the monitors as the alien fleet hovered above Earth. Her fingers danced across the touchscreen as she issued orders to various units across the planet. She could feel the weight of the moment, the pressure mounting, but she was ready. She knew what had to be done. Humanity had spent years preparing for something like this, and now the time had come to unveil their secret weapon. Nemesis, the code name for the weapon, had been developed under the utmost secrecy. It was an artificial intelligence, unlike any the world had ever seen, designed to control and manipulate every resource on Earth, from satellites to military drones to agricultural systems. It was a network of interconnected machines capable of turning anything into a weapon with the right commands. It could even alter the environment itself, repurposing Earth's own natural resources into powerful offensive tools. Kane had spent the last few months overseeing its activation, but today was the day when the full potential of Nemesis would be realized. The Zarnoth believed they could conquer Earth easily. They saw humans as primitive beings with no real understanding of the universe, but they had no idea what humanity had been working on in the shadows. Nemesis was the result of years of research and experimentation, and it was about to change the course of history. The alien fleet was about to make its first move. They were poised to strike Earth's major cities with devastating energy beams. The world was watching helplessly as their doom seemed inevitable. Kane didn't have time to waste. She knew that if they didn't act now, the invasion would be unstoppable. She took a deep breath and pressed the final sequence to bring Nemesis online. Across the planet, a series of hidden facilities, flickered to life satellites in orbit, began transmitting a surge of energy, and in the blink of an eye, the entire alien fleet lost its shield protection, their advanced technology rendered useless by the power of Nemesis. The aliens were stunned. They had never encountered anything like this before. Humanity's first wave of defense had been a success. The Zarnoff ships hesitated, their crews scrambled to understand what had happened, but it was too late. Kane's forces were already moving to strike. They had prepared for this moment, and now they unleashed the full force of Earth's technology. The drones that had once been used for surveillance and minor tasks were now deadly machines of war, tearing through the air. In a coordinated attack, their weapons hitting alien ships with precision, the once intimidating fleet of the Zarnoff was crumbling under the weight of humanity's ingenuity. The alien commanders on board their ships issued frantic orders, but their attempts to regain control were futile. Nemesis had already begun to adapt and counter their moves with terrifying speed. Earth's forces were relentless. The battle had only just begun, but it was clear to the Zarnoff that they had underestimated the planet they had sought to conquer. As the first skirmishes unfolded, General Kane stood in silence, watching the unfolding battle. Her heart raced, but there was no time for celebration. The Zarnoff would not give up easily. They had only just begun to fight, but Earth had sent them a message loud and clear. They were no longer defenseless. They were ready for war. The alien fleet was in disarray, their ships scattered across the sky. As Earth's counterattack continued without mercy, the once invincible warships that had dominated the skies were now fighting for survival, their advanced weaponry useless against the power of Nemesis. Each alien ship that was disabled or destroyed sent a ripple of panic through the remaining fleet. The Zarnoff had never encountered such resistance before. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. General Kane watched from the command center as the battle raged on. The AI-controlled drones were relentless, their precision unmatched as they tore through the alien forces. The drones worked together in perfect synchronization, like a well-oiled machine, each strike calculated and deliberate. There was no room for error. The humans were playing offense now, and the Zarnoff were scrambling to react. But the aliens weren't giving up so easily. Their commanders regrouped and began to adapt their tactics. They sent out smaller vessels to harass Earth's defenses, trying to weaken the human forces with hit-and-run attacks. But they quickly discovered that Nemesis was capable of reacting to these tactics faster than they could plan them. The AI predicted their moves before they even made them and countered with overwhelming force. Kane knew this was just the beginning. The Zarnoff might be temporarily stunned, but they would regroup and come back stronger. They were no strangers to war, and they would stop at nothing to complete their mission. Earth had surprised them. But it wasn't over yet. As the battle wore on, Kane issued orders to bring in reinforcements. Earth's military had prepared for every possible scenario, and now they were deploying every available fighter and bomber to assist in the fight. Meanwhile, the Zarnoff flagship remained in orbit above Earth, its immense size dwarfing everything beneath it. The alien commander Orcs stood at the helm of the ship, watching the unfolding chaos on his monitors. His fury was palpable. The Zarnoff had been humiliated. They had expected to crush Earth's feeble defenses, and instead they were being driven back by a force they couldn't comprehend. He turned to his officers and ordered them to prepare the doomsday weapon they had been saving for such an occasion. Orac's plan was simple but deadly. He intended to deploy a massive energy beam capable of destroying entire continents. He knew it was a last resort, but if he could destroy Earth's major population centers, with a single blow the humans would be forced to surrender or face total annihilation. The weapon had never been used before, but he was confident in its power. He believed that this would be the final solution to their problem. As the Zarnoth flagship powered up its doomsday weapon, the human forces closed in for the kill. Kane's forces had already disabled several key alien ships and were now focused on the flagship itself. They knew that if they could take out the flagship, they could cripple the entire fleet. The battle for Earth was far from over, but General Kane wasn't backing down. She knew that this was the moment that would decide humanity's fate. If they failed here, it could all be over. The countdown to the alien weapon was ticking down, but Kane's forces weren't about to let that happen. The time for defense was over. It was time for Earth to go on the offense and take the fight directly to the heart of the Zarnoth Empire. The Zarnoth flagship loomed above Earth, its energy weapon powering up the entire ship, was vibrating with the intensity of the impending attack. Orcs stood in the control room, his hand gripping the console. As the countdown continued, the alien fleet was in chaos. But this weapon was their last hope. If it worked, they could level Earth's cities and force the humans to surrender once and for all. But Kane and her forces were not about to let that happen. General Kane knew the weapon was about to fire and time was running out. She ordered her forces to concentrate all their firepower on the flagship. The human drones swarmed in faster than ever, moving with deadly precision, their weapons firing on all cylinders, each shot aimed directly at the alien flagship. The sky above Earth lit up with a dazzling display of energy beams and explosions as humanity's counterattack intensified. The Zarnoth flagship shook under the assault, but the weapon continued to charge. Kane's heart raced as she watched the battle unfold. The flagship was a massive target, but it was heavily shielded, and its weapons were powerful. It would take everything they had to disable it. But Kane was determined. The alien weapon could not be allowed to fire. She knew that if the Zarnoth succeeded, it could destroy not just Earth, but any hope of humanity's survival. The human forces pushed forward relentlessly. The drones dove in from every direction as fighter jets and bombers joined the fray. Their coordinated strikes weakened the alien defenses bit by bit, but the flagship was still standing. It had taken significant damage, but its weapon was still charging closer and closer to firing its deadly energy beam. Kane's mind raced through her options. There was no time for hesitation, no time for second-guessing. She knew she had one shot to stop the weapon from firing. She quickly gave the order to deploy the final phase of Nemesis power. She had kept this last resort hidden as a last line of defense if it came to this point, and now it had. The Nemesis AI network tapped into every resource on Earth, pulling energy from the planet's core, redirecting satellites and power plants to amplify the human force's firepower in an unprecedented surge. The resulting energy blast hit the flagship with unimaginable force. The massive ship was struck by an explosion that lit up the entire sky. A shockwave rippled through the atmosphere. The Zarnoth flagship was rocked to its core. Its shields flickered, and its weapon began to power down. Inside the flagship, Oracle's fury turned to panic as the lights in the control room flickered, and the ship groaned under the pressure of the blast. He could feel the ship shaking violently as the energy beam faltered. The doomsday weapon had been rendered useless. The flagship was crippled, and now its fate hung in the balance. The alien commander turned to his crew, barking orders to prepare for emergency evacuation, but it was too late. General Kane saw the change on the battlefield. The flagship was no longer a threat. Earth's forces surged forward, pressing the advantage. The remaining Zarnoth ships were now desperate, trying to flee or regroup, but the human forces were everywhere. They had no intention of letting the invaders escape. With the flagship neutralized and the alien fleet in full retreat, the battle was all but won. The Zarnoth had been defeated. Their doomsday weapon failed, and their arrogance had cost them everything. But Kane knew that this victory was only the beginning. The Zarnoth might be retreating now, but they would return someday, and when they did, Earth would be ready. The alien fleet was in retreat, but the damage had already been done. The once mighty Zarnoth had been brought to their knees, and humanity had emerged victorious. But the victory felt hollow to General Kane. She knew the battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The Zarnoth had been humiliated, but they were not a race to be underestimated. They would return, and next time they would come prepared. As Earth's forces began to regroup and tend to the damage caused by the battle, the Zarnoth commanders huddled in their remaining ships, a few stragglers limping away from the battlefield. They were retreating, but not in defeat. Oracle, the commander of the fleet, was furious. His pride had been shattered, and his empire was on the brink of collapse. He refused to accept the fact that humanity had been able to fight back so fiercely. Oracle sent a message back to the heart of the Zarnoth Empire, a call for reinforcements, and a promise that Earth would not escape unscathed. He swore that he would leave a counterattack, one that would make Earth's victory feel like nothing more than a fleeting dream. But even as he spoke the words, he knew the truth. His fleet had been crippled by the strength of humanity's defense. The Zarnoth were in no position to launch another full-scale attack anytime soon. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Kane and her team were working tirelessly to secure the planet's defenses. They knew the Zarnoth would return, but now they had a weapon that could stand up to whatever the Empire could throw at them. Nemesis had proven its worth beyond anything they could have imagined, and its power was still growing with each passing day. Humanity now had the ability to defend itself from any threat that came its way. The governments of Earth convened to discuss the next steps for the planet. Now that they had a clear understanding of what they were up against, they had not only survived the invasion, but had also learned from it. They would rebuild their cities and infrastructure and take measures to prepare for future attacks. They would no longer live in fear of the unknown. The time for unity had come. As Earth's leaders met, Kane found herself reflecting on the events of the past few days. The invasion had come as a shock, but it had also shown humanity just how resilient they could be. They had fought back and won the war against an enemy that thought them insignificant, but the victory had also shown her the dangers of underestimating the vastness of the universe. The Zarnoth might be beaten, but there were many other threats out there waiting to be discovered. Kane walked through the military command center, looking at the screens displaying Earth's forces in the process of recovering and fortifying. She saw the strength and resolve in the eyes of her fellow soldiers and leaders, and she knew they would be ready for whatever came next. The victory was a turning point, but the galaxy was vast, and humanity had only just begun to understand what it meant to be part of it. Oracle's threat loomed in the background, but General Kane was no longer concerned with fear or doubt. She had witnessed the power of Earth's unity and its ability to adapt to the unknown. The next time the Zarnoth came, they would find a very different planet awaiting them, and this time humanity would not just survive, they would prevail again. The echoes of victory were still fresh in the air, but General Kane couldn't ignore the rising tension in her chest. The Zarnoth had been defeated, but their retreat was not a simple surrender. It was a signal to the galaxy that Earth was now a target, one that had proven its strength and resilience. The universe was vast and filled with power-hungry species who now knew that humanity was not as insignificant as they had once believed. Kane paced around the command center, her mind racing with possibilities. The military had done its part, and the people of Earth had rallied together in ways that no one could have predicted. But now came the hard part. They had to prepare for the inevitable return of the Zarnoth, or worse, the arrival of new threats. The battle was not just for survival, it was for the future of humanity. She turned to the holographic map of Earth's defenses and saw Nemesis at the core of the global network. Its AI had evolved rapidly since the first invasion. Its ability to predict and counter threats had made it an invaluable asset to Earth's forces. But Kane knew that no matter how advanced Nemesis became, it was not enough on its own. Humanity needed to be ready to face whatever the galaxy threw their way. The humans had been thrust into the intergalactic spotlight, and now it was time to face the reality of their new position. Earth was no longer an isolated planet, it was part of a much larger and more dangerous universe. Kane had hoped that the victory over the Zarnoth would give humanity a sense of peace, but instead it had opened their eyes to a much larger challenge. The question was, how could they survive in a galaxy filled with so many unknowns? Kane looked over the reports coming in from every corner of the planet. Earth's forces had begun reinforcing their military bases and fortifying their cities. The technological advancements made during the conflict with the Zarnoth were already being adapted for future defense systems, but Kane couldn't shake the feeling that they were simply preparing for the next war rather than preparing for the peace they had earned. Despite all the advances humanity had made, they were still a young species in the grand scheme of the galaxy. There were civilizations out there far older and far more powerful than the Zarnath, but Cain knew that Earth's strength came not from the power of its weapons, but from its people. The unity and determination that had gotten them through the invasion would be the key to their survival in the future. Cain was determined to make sure that Earth would not just be a passive participant in the galactic theater, but an active and respected power to be reckoned with. The time had come to take the next step. She couldn't allow Earth to sit idle and wait for the next invader to strike. They had to reach out into the stars and make their presence known. The decision was clear: humanity would need to expand its reach into space, explore new systems, build new alliances, and prepare for the unknown challenges that lay ahead. It was time to send out the message that Earth was not just a small, insignificant planet. It was a force that would shape the future of the galaxy. Cain took a deep breath and issued the command. The next chapter of humanity's journey had begun, and she would lead them into the unknown. The Zarnath had been their first challenge, but they would not be the last. Cain knew that the universe was a dangerous place, and humanity had only begun to scratch the surface of what lay beyond. Their homeworld, Earth, would no longer hide in the shadows. It was time to stand tall and face the stars with pride. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity was no longer a species to be ignored. It was a force in the galaxy, and no one would ever forget their name. The calm after the battle was deceptive. Earth's cities had begun to rebuild, the scars of war healing slowly, but the threat of the Zarnath still lingered like a shadow hanging over the planet. General Cain knew that this uneasy peace was temporary. The Zarnath were not the only threat humanity might face, and now the galaxy knew that Earth was no longer an easy target. The question was whether the other powers in the universe would see this as an opportunity to strike or an invitation to make contact. Cain stood in the war room staring at a holographic map of Earth and its defenses. Nemesis had given humanity an edge, but it was not enough to ensure long-term survival. The alien empire's defeat had proven that Earth could stand its ground, but that victory had come at a high cost. The Zarnath had underestimated humanity, but what if the next invader wasn't so reckless? What if they came prepared for Earth's response? Cain rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She had saved the planet, but the war wasn't over. She had seen the destruction of the battle and the lost lives. The cost of defense was something no one truly understood until they saw it firsthand. The threat of the Zarnath was over, but the bigger question remained: how would Earth handle what was to come? Across the globe, military forces were on high alert, but not in panic. Earth's armies had learned from the invasion. They had prepared themselves for the unexpected in a way no one ever thought possible. The Zarnath had pushed humanity to its limits, but now they were ready for anything. Their technology had been upgraded, and their tactics had evolved. Nemesis had become an integral part of their military strategy, but there was still so much left to do to ensure Earth would remain safe. The United Nations convened again, this time with a new urgency. The world leaders understood that their previous division and infighting had been a weakness that the Zarnath had exploited, but now they were united with a common purpose. Earth's defenses needed to be solidified, and its unity needed to be maintained so that no force could tear the planet apart. In orbit, Nemesis had become Earth's eyes and ears. Its vast network of satellites now monitored the galaxy, watching for any signs of new threats. Its artificial intelligence kept track of every movement, from the stars themselves to the smallest debris in space. Nemesis had become humanity's safeguard, but the question was, how long could it maintain this vigilance before it too became overwhelmed by the sheer size and complexity of the universe? Cain knew that the Zarnath would not be the last challenge Earth would face. The galaxy was vast and unknown, and humanity had only scratched the surface of what lay beyond their solar system. She had prepared Earth for the Zarnath invasion, but she had to ensure that they were prepared for what came next, whatever that may be. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, but the peace felt fragile. Cain couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that Earth wasn't ready for yet. She looked out the window at the horizon, a sense of determination washing over her. Humanity had proven its strength, But it was time to take the next step. Earth was no longer just a planet to be invaded, it was a force to be reckoned with, and she would make sure that it stayed that way. The war had ended, but the journey had just begun. As months passed, the sense of unease never left General Kane. She stood at the front of the command center, watching the holographic projections flicker with activity. Earth's defenses were stronger than ever. Nemesis was constantly adapting and evolving. But she knew that the galaxy was full of dangers, far beyond anything they had faced before the Zarnoth were gone. But what if other civilizations were out there watching and waiting? Earth had become a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope for any species that had ever been oppressed by a stronger force. Humanity had proven they could fight back. But Kane wasn't naive. She understood that this was just the beginning. The peace they had was only temporary, and it was only a matter of time before the universe would test them again. On the other side of the galaxy, something stirred. The Zarnoth were not the only empire in existence, and their defeat had made waves across countless star systems. The news of Earth's unexpected victory spread like wildfire. Some empires viewed it as an inspiration, others as a threat. Whispers of the planet reached the ears of far more advanced civilizations, ones that had kept to the shadows and watched the growing human influence with suspicion. Kane's mind raced as she read the reports. The threat of the Zarnoth was gone, but it had opened the door to something much bigger. Humanity had made its mark in the galaxy, and now every race would be watching them, waiting for their next move. Some would come with peaceful intentions, others with hostile designs, and Earth was no longer the isolated backwater it once was. A meeting was scheduled with representatives from the United Nations and military leaders to discuss the next steps for Earth. It was time to start thinking beyond defense and towards exploration. If humanity was going to survive in this vast and unknown universe, they had to learn more about the galaxies and the forces that operated within them. They couldn't simply wait for the next threat to arrive. They needed to take control of their destiny. Kane walked into the conference room, where Earth's leaders had gathered. Their faces were a mix of determination and uncertainty. They all knew what was at stake. The future of humanity had changed forever. They were no longer the helpless species they once were. They were now an emerging power in a galaxy filled with both dangers and opportunities. As the meeting began, Kane outlined a plan for Earth's next steps. She proposed expanding humanity's reach into space, forming alliances with peaceful species, and developing the technology needed to explore and defend against any threat that came their way. Nemesis would continue to evolve and improve, but it would no longer be Earth's only tool. They would need more resources, more knowledge, and more allies. The discussions were intense as the leaders debated the best course of action. Some were in favor of cautious exploration, while others pushed for immediate action to establish Earth as a dominant force in the galaxy. But in the end, they all agreed on one thing: humanity's future was no longer confined to Earth. The stars were now within reach, and they would make sure Earth stood strong in the face of whatever came next. As the meeting ended, General Kane stood before the room and spoke the words that would define the next era for Earth. Our survival was never guaranteed, but now we have a chance to shape our future, to explore the stars, and forge our place among the civilizations of the galaxy. We've already proven we can fight, and now we must show the universe that we are more than just survivors. We are builders and explorers, and we will not back down. The future was uncertain, but humanity had the will to face it. No matter what came next, Earth was no longer just a planet to be conquered. It was a force in the universe, one that would stand tall and proud against any threat that dared challenge it. The journey was just beginning, and this time humanity would take control of their own destiny.